My relatives burst into our new home as if the walls, the furniture, and even the air within belonged to them. And I, along with my daughter and husband, were merely temporary tenants, permitted to live on the edge of their grand estate. "Show them some respect," Leon said with a lazy grin, as if it were a trivial matter not worth discussing. But the moment I cautiously mentioned that my family was planning to come for a few days, his face twisted, and I heard a dry, "It'll be too crowded." He expected me, as usual, to remain silent, to swallow it, to pretend it was the way it should be. But my answer took him by surprise, and for the first time, I saw a shadow of displeasure, mixed with confusion, flicker in his eyes. "My name is Anna. I'm 35 years old, a fully remote UX designer, and I've learned to value silence, order, and my own space, which is essential for concentration. I live with my husband, Leon, and our 5-year-old daughter, Rita, and until recently, I thought we'd built a healthy, secure life. We married 6 years ago, and all that time, I believed we were bound not only by love, but also by mutual respect. However, moving to a new house soon made me rethink our relationship. The house was our dream. 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a bright living room, a cozy guest room, and most importantly, my own office, where I went to work and where I could finally be alone with my thoughts, free from the endless noise of cartoons or my husband's phone calls. This office became my quiet refuge, an island of independence and support. At first, everything was going great. I literally caught myself thinking that we were living exactly the way I'd once imagined. Dinners together, Rita's laughter, the smell of freshly brewed coffee in the morning. But soon his parents found out about the guest room. That's how it all started. I remember that morning, Thursday. Leon hastily grabbed a thermos, grabbed his jacket, and, as if in passing, said at the door, "Oh, my parents are staying for the weekend. They'll be here tonight." I froze, blinked, and asked again, "Tonight? You didn't even think to ask me first?" He just shrugged. "You're home all day anyway. I figured everything would be fine." I bit my tongue. Arguing over a couple of days seemed pointless, so I simply got busy cleaning, bought groceries, and tried to make the room look perfect. When Lucia and Fonz arrived that evening, it was like a scene from a bad play. She walked in, looked around, wrinkled her nose, and asked with mild disdain if we really had chosen this particular neighborhood. He, without bothering to ask permission, lit a cigarette right there in the backyard. Rita ran out to greet them, beaming with joy, holding a drawing, but Fonz didn't even look at her. "You're in the way, baby. Go play somewhere else." And I watched my little girl's expression fade. She quietly returned to the house, sat on the kitchen floor, and began coloring in her books silently, with a new, unfamiliar detachment. And it was the first time I'd noticed someone capable of so quickly and painfully shutting her out. That weekend turned into a nightmare. Lucia didn't lift a finger, but I cooked, cleaned, brought snacks and coffee, made the beds, and picked up Fawn's cigarette ashes from the floor. Every time I tried to disappear into my office, they would knock. "Anna, where are the towels?" "Anna, heat up dinner." "Anna, your internet is slow. Fix it." 3 nights in a row, and by the time they left, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. My work was behind schedule, and the lingering smell of smoke in the house mingled with the cloying aroma of Lucia's lavender cream. But the worst part was, Rita stopped coming into the guest room, whispering to me one day, "That's Grandma's room. She's always angry there," and confessing that talking gave her a headache. I decided to talk to Leon. "Leon, can we discuss your parents?" I asked, trying to sound calm. He muttered, still glued to his phone, "What about them?" I explained. They were scaring Rita. Fonz had yelled at her. Lucia was completely ignoring her, and I was afraid it would hurt her. He chuckled and replied, "My father has his own routine. You don't expect him to change it for a 5-year-old, do you?" "Maybe you should teach her some manners." I couldn't believe my ears. "You think Rita is to blame?" Leon finally looked up. "I think your job is to raise our daughter, take care of the house, and respect my parents." Something in my chest snapped. "I work too. I reminded him. "From home," he snapped. "It's not the same thing." I fell silent, but the first crack sounded inside me. Not yet a fracture, but already a threat to it. Things moved quickly from there. A week later, Lucia showed up unannounced, bringing 4 friends with her. I was video chatting with a client when I heard the annoying ringing sound, and before I even reached the door, her voice was already ringing in the hallway. "Anna, we're here." 5 women burst into the living room, laughing and carrying grocery bags, as if this was their home and not mine. Lucia handed me a list: coffee, lemon pie, something savory, maybe croissants. "Go ahead, sweetie." She didn't even ask, she simply ordered. I apologized to the client, closed my laptop, drove to the store, bought everything myself, and set the table with my best dishes. One of my friends looked around and said, "It's a lovely house, although a little cold, don't you think?" To which Lucia loudly responded, "Well, Anna doesn't have the most feminine manners, but she's trying." I stood in the kitchen, my fingers gripping the countertop, breathing through my nose to keep from exploding. Later that evening, as I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to persuade myself to relax my shoulders for just a few minutes, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw my mother's name. "Hi, dear," I heard her voice, soft and a little tired, but so familiar that my eyes stung. "Your dad had the weekend off, and we were thinking, maybe we could come to Boston next week if that would be convenient for you." I pressed the phone to my ear, feeling my heart pound against my ribcage, and said hastily, "Yes, of course, come, I'd love to." The words came out too quickly, too passionately, but I couldn't help it. We hadn't seen each other for almost a year, and the 3 states between us had become a chasm I felt every morning and every evening. I missed them more than I'd ever realized, and the thought of them seeing our house, the little garden where the first shoots were just beginning to appear, and Rita's drawings, which I carefully folded into a folder, filled me with an almost childish delight. I wanted to show them what I'd built, what I'd accomplished, what our life had become. But remembering Leon's countless surprises when his parents would show up at our house unannounced, I decided I couldn't do the same to him. That evening, as we sat in the living room, I said softly, "Leon, my parents want to come over for 3 days, Friday through Sunday, just to see the house." He looked up from his laptop, irritation flickering in his eyes. "No, it'll be too crowded." I blinked, disbelieving. "Too crowded? It's only 3 days. These are my parents. They just want to see each other." Leon slammed his laptop shut as if to put a final point. "That's different. My parents are used to being at home, but yours aren't. It'll be exhausting." "I need peace and quiet on the weekends," I stared at him, unwaveringly. "So, when yours stay here, it's peace and quiet, but when mine do, what if it's a problem?" "I work too. Cook, clean, smile, try my best. But when it comes to my parents, it turns out it's too much for you." He stood up. I said, "No, take your time." And then something inside me stopped cracking and began to sharpen. I heard my own voice, calm, even too calm. "Okay, then I'll book them a hotel." Leon frowned. "What? I'll stay with them." I nodded. "Me too." He laughed, sure I was bluffing. "Well, let's see how long you can last doing everything by yourself." I didn't sleep a wink that night. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in months it became clear to me I couldn't keep silent any longer. While Leon snored next to me, I lay there, listening to the ticking of the clock, my heart beating rapidly, but not from anxiety. It was focused, determined, as if it knew the path I'd long sought. At 4 a.m, I rose quietly, walked into my office, and opened my laptop. In a folder labeled Personal, a list I'd started several weeks ago awaited me. A copy of the letter, a hotel reservation, a folder with financial reports, a draft of the divorce papers. I hadn't looked at it in a long time, but now I clicked on the file, and suddenly it all stopped seeming like a terrifying fantasy and began to feel like a breath after a long period of suffocation. I didn't want war. I needed a way out. That morning, when Rita left for kindergarten, I began preparing. I carefully packed her clothes, her favorite books, my documents, my work equipment, and a few precious things that couldn't be replaced into boxes. I wrote the contents of each box in tiny handwriting and hid them behind the sofa in the office, where Leon never looked. I booked a car for Sunday delivery, instructing everyone to call only my cell phone, and everything was to be sent directly to my parents' address in the neighboring state. For the first time in a long time, I felt a clear sense of purpose. That evening, I cooked Leon's favorite dish, and Rita helped me fold napkins into neat triangles, giggling cheerfully. He didn't notice how carefully I prepared dinner, didn't notice how serious and focused my daughter was, and he, buried in his phone, only complained about the traffic. Later, after Rita had fallen asleep, I spoke up. I want you to know that my parents are still coming tomorrow. They're staying at a hotel nearby. I'm going to stay with them for the weekend, and I'll take Rita so she can spend time with them. Leon slowly looked up. Are you serious? I nodded. Yes. You said their presence in the house would be unnecessary, and I respect that. He narrowed his eyes. Don't act noble. You're just making a scene because you didn't get your way. I calmly replied, No. I'm doing what's best for me and for Rita. He snorted. Unbelievable. You think you can just walk away and everything will magically change? I tilted my head slightly. No, but it can't get any worse. Leon chuckled and shook his head. Great. Go play house at the hotel. Let's see how long you can last without my help. There it was, his confidence, his arrogance, his delusion that I depended on him for everything. But he still didn't understand, didn't even want to notice, that I'd been bearing the entire weight of this house, our entire life for years. I just hadn't left yet. The next morning I got up earlier than usual, quietly, so as not to wake Leon, and began packing Rita's things into her favorite purple suitcase, the one with little stars painted on the lining, the one she always proudly lugged behind her, even when it seemed too heavy. I carefully folded her dresses, soft pajamas, and favorite picture books, then gently woke her. She sat up on the pillow, rubbing her eyes with her tiny fists, and asked sleepily, Mom, where are we going so early? I smiled and said, We're going to Grandma and Grandpa's. Spend the weekend with them. It'll be a real adventure. Her face immediately lit up with joy. She straightened her shoulders and whispered, Really? Can I bring my unicorn blanket? I nodded. Of course, sweetie, it's coming with us. Before we left the house, I left a one-page note on the kitchen table, written in a cool, clear hand. Leon, I'm going with Rita to my parents for the weekend. There's food in the fridge. The trash is picked up on Sunday. I won't answer your phone. Anna. I folded it carefully and weighed it down with a mug to keep it from blowing away in the draft. We slipped out of the house just after dawn, when the morning light was just breaking through the light haze, and there was something liberating in the silence. My parents were already waiting for us at the hotel. Rita, squealing with delight, ran to her grandfather, and he scooped her up as if she were still a tiny thing he could hold in one hand. Mom hugged me so tightly, I found it hard to breathe, and quietly whispered, You did everything right. I didn't respond, only hugged her tighter, trying to hold on a little longer, to keep from bursting into tears right there in the lobby. The hotel was simple, but it was warm, quiet, and clean, and this feeling of simplicity and comfort was far more valuable than luxury. We had adjoining rooms with soft beds and a small table, where Rita immediately settled down to color new pictures. The hotel staff gave her a set of colored pencils and a children's map of the city with illustrated landmarks, and she beamed as if she'd received a true treasure. That same day, we went for a walk in the city garden, bought lemonade from a street cart, and stopped at a small bookstore, where I let Rita choose a book. She laughed the whole time, held my hand, and I kept expecting her to ask, When are we going home? But the question never came. Later, over dinner, she leaned toward me and whispered, It's very nice here. No one yells. I saw Mom turn away to hide her tears, and Dad just nodded silently, but there was such heaviness in his gaze that it hurt. That night, I disconnected Leon's number. He called 5 times, sent a dozen messages. Where are you? Do you think this is mature? You're punishing me for nothing. I need clean clothes for Monday. Are you coming back? You're embarrassing yourself. I didn't open any of them. I turned off my phone and slept more peacefully than I had in weeks. On Saturday morning, while Rita was playing with my parents, I went out onto the tiny balcony and opened my laptop. I checked the tracking number from the moving company. Everything was going according to plan. The boxes were supposed to be picked up on Sunday at 2 p.m. and delivered to my parents by midweek. Everything was moving. I opened the folder of correspondence with my lawyer, which had been waiting for my decision for weeks, ever since I started secretly recording Leon's angry outbursts. There were recordings of him calling me lazy, arrogant, ungrateful, mocking my work, insulting my family, and yelling so loudly that Rita cried in the next room. Several hours of audio, a stack of documents, bills, a mortgage, groceries, all in my name. All this time, I was the one keeping the house afloat, and he was playing the boss. I typed, "Please file for divorce on Monday and apply for temporary custody. I'm ready." Sunday passed peacefully, almost happily. We went to the aquarium, ate ice cream by the river, and Rita held my hand tightly and spoke enthusiastically about her favorite clownfish. That evening, back in our room, she fell asleep right in my lap, and I looked at her face, at that pure, childish sleep, and thought about everything she had learned so early but couldn't put into words. The coldness, the detachment, the anxiety, the cautious glances from around the corner when Lucia was home, and the way she stopped running around the living room even when she was happy. No child should have to adapt to such fear. That evening, Leon wrote again, "You're turning Rita against me. You're cruel. If you don't come home tomorrow, I'll call a lawyer." I replied only one thing. It's too late. On Monday morning, I got up early, made coffee while Rita was still asleep, and looked out the window at the city, shrouded in spring fog. I opened my laptop and refreshed my email. There was an email with the subject, "Divorce petition filed. Proof of filing attached." I sat with my mug in my hands, staring at the screen, knowing it was done. By mid-morning, the documents were delivered to Leon, and I knew the exact moment he read them because the phone on the table began vibrating furiously for almost 5 minutes straight. Calls, voicemails, messages. "What is this, Anna? Are you seriously filing for divorce? We can talk. No need for lawyers. Answer me. This is crazy." I didn't answer. I simply took out my noise-canceling headphones and went to help Rita choose a dress for her trip to the zoo. The next day, the tone of his messages had changed, and they no longer contained anger or threats, but only confusion and an attempt to manipulate. "You're making a mistake, Anna. You're overreacting. You have no idea how much this will all cost." At that moment, I realized he was right, but not in the way he meant it. It wasn't my determination to leave that was costly, but the years I'd lived with him, filled with humiliation and constant guilt, and now I'd paid the price for those years in full. My lawyer, Bella, acted quickly and confidently. She compiled a complete financial picture of our lives for the court, a mortgage statement, itemized utility bills, documents for our joint account, and even a schedule of the rare visits from Leon's parents, which he liked to present as proof of his thoughtfulness. I collected stacks of receipts for groceries, for school supplies, for repairs, and even for half the patio renovation his mother, Lucia, insisted on so the yard would look worthy of her guests. Bella calculated. Over the past 2 years, Leon had paid no more than 30% of the house expenses. The rest was mine, and this became apparent for the first time when we added up the figures. He was too proud to admit it, and I was too tired to notice. We filed a formal complaint, including a joint custody agreement, alimony for emotional distress, and a 50-50 division of assets, including the house. Leon exploded. "You can't take the house from me," he screamed. "It's my house." "You left, so you lost it," I responded through Bella. The house was jointly owned, and in our state, that's provable. Transcripts of my recordings were included in the case file. His yelling, mocking my work, harsh words directed at my family, and even how he once called Rita annoying for laughing too loudly. When we offered him mediation, he refused, so Bella filed a lawsuit directly. A week before the trial, Bella called and said Leon was ready to settle. "Why so fast?" I asked, clutching the phone. "He's broken, Anna," she replied calmly. For the first time, he realized he'd been paying next to nothing, and now he's responsible for legal fees, the mortgage, and family support. He can't afford a drawn-out case. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, stunned. All this time, he'd truly believed he was the breadwinner. Our settlement turned out to be fair. He kept the house, but the entire mortgage fell on his shoulders. I received my share of the assessed value as a direct payment, plus monthly alimony and a small compensation package. It was enough to cover the rent while I looked for something of my own. That same evening, I told my parents, "It's settled." Mom looked at me for a long moment and quietly said, "So it really is over?" I nodded. It was over long before I left. I just couldn't admit it to myself then. A week later, Rita and I moved into a small townhouse not far from my parents. The house was modest, but the kitchen faced the sunny side, and the yard was grassy enough for my daughter to run barefoot. I let her choose the room's color, and she chose lavender without hesitation. The first thing she did was pin her drawings to the wall. I moved my desk by the window and began taking on new freelance clients. Within 3 months, I was earning more than I had in all my years of marriage, and most importantly, without the constant pressure, reproaches, and judgment. Freedom suddenly felt less scary and more profitable. Leon tried to call one day from an unknown number, but I hung up. Lucia sent Rita a birthday card with no return address and a $20 bill. My daughter handed it to her grandfather, saying, "Please buy some more seeds for the garden," and never mentioned the card again. One day, Bella called again and said, "He's put the house up for sale. He's struggling with the mortgage." I listened and felt no triumph, only a strange relief. This house had long since ceased to be a symbol of my dreams. It had become a monument to someone else's control. Now it belonged to no one. One day, Rita and I were baking cookies in our tiny kitchen. She stood on a stepladder next to me, laughing and dropping handfuls of chocolate chips directly into the dough. "You know what I like about this kitchen, Mom?" she asked. "So what?" I smiled. "It's quiet here." "No one says I'm disturbing anyone," she said seriously. I leaned over and kissed the top of her head. "Because this kitchen is ours." Later, after she fell asleep, I went out onto the veranda with a cup of coffee and for the first time in years, simply enjoyed the cool evening air. No one knocked on the door, demanded attention, or barraged me with unkind words. Only silence. Living, healing. I remembered Leon once saying, "You can't do this alone." He was wrong. I was never alone. All I had to do was open the door and see those who had always been there, my parents, my daughter, and finally myself.